What's good, everybody? It's your boy Sunny, and I'm back again with another episode of Sunny Talk. And on today's episode of Sunny Talk, I'm here with Chris from the 20 Years Up podcast. How's it going, Chris?
It's going pretty good.
All right. And on this podcast, we like to get people a little bit of history of you, or like just talk of your past and like start from the beginning up to the present day. But before we get into that, can you let the people know a little bit about yourself, a brief overview?
Yeah, so like a brief overview would be I grew up in inner city St. Louis, joined the Air Force at 19 years old to be a aircraft mechanic. I did
Mm-hmm.
that for 20 years. I retired in 2018, and I went to law school, graduated law school in 2022, took and passed the bar, and now I'm a practicing attorney as a civilian after my retirement.
Nice, nice. It's funny that you say you're in law. When you booked for the appointment, it was your law website. And I was like, wait, who's this lawyer that like I'm like, who's this lawyer that's trying to get on the show? I don't even know. Like I had to go back and look like, all right, let me see who this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So all right, so that's very interesting. So 20 years in the military as a mechanic. So was that like that branch was the Air Force, or is it like
Yeah, Air Force.
okay, nice, nice. Okay, so before we get into all of that, so you were born and raised in St. Louis?
I was born in St. Louis. I did like 9 years in St. Louis, and then we moved to just outside Carson City. Lived on a horse ranch for like a year, year and a half, and then eventually moved to Northern California. And then I enlisted in the Air Force in 1998
Nice,
out of Northern California.
nice, nice. Okay, well, so we'll get there. So all right, so take me back to St. Louis, some of your earliest memories.
Man, not good.
Not
Like
good.
I didn't grow up rich by any stretch of the imagination in St. Louis. Like I have said before that I probably could have lived my life a billion times. I wouldn't end up where I am today. And I also consider my time in the military to be what I call a socioeconomic shortcut. Like I grew up Section 8 housing, food stamps, welfare, single mother, food banks, homelessness, inner city St. Louis. Like the guy up the street used to shoot up heroin on a stoop and then come like speeding down the street where us kids were playing. Um, like I shouldn't be where I am today
Hmm.
if you think about my past. But kind of here I am. So moved around a lot as a kid because a lot of places were unsteady, unsafe. So there's lots of transitory sort of periods.
Hmm.
And St. Louis was really rough. A lot of crime, a lot of violence, stuff like that.
Okay, so in St. Louis, growing up in your neighborhood, so you said it was like not a rich neighborhood, but it's just well, far from rich, but so how was it growing up in the actual neighborhood? So you said that the guy up the block had the needle in his arm, so just a wild environment, I'm assuming.
It was, and I hadn't been back when I drove cross country for like I moved from the Southwest up to New England area in 2018, 2019, and I actually stopped by my old neighborhood, and I hadn't been there since 1989. And I was also an adult, and everything felt smaller. Like the long walks to the corner store and down the street as an adult, it was like a very short walk to get there. My perception of the world was really different. Even my school was a block and a half away. Um, but like I was growing up in like the bad neighborhoods, and not to make an issue out of it, but like I was the minority in my community. Like there were not many other white people in my school. I wasn't like the
Mm,
me and my brother were not the only white kids, but we were definitely the minority. But it was like never an issue, kind of. But also, I was
mhm.
like 8. Like
No,
a lot of
yeah,
that stuff doesn't start boiling up at 8 years old. Not really.
yeah. That's more so like in high school and
Yeah,
stuff
you're
like,
just
or middle
playing at
school.
8. You
Yeah.
don't care.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Oh, so that's interesting. So once you said St. Louis, initially I thought maybe you're like in a wider area, but just not rich. But so it was somewhat mixed, but mainly Was it mainly black people or was
Yeah.
it different minorities?
Mainly black people. I think down the street there were some older. When I say older, I mean like maybe mid 30s white people, but like all the kids were black kids essentially.
Okay, okay. And so what type of background do you come from as far as your family? Like they're just
Uh,
born and raised in America for centuries or
yeah. I did one of those genealogy tests recently
hmm
just to kind of see where I was from. I'm like 97% European descent, so it doesn't get any wider.
yeah,
But like my mom's side, she had like 8 brothers and sisters, so like the one of those big Catholic families. My dad didn't really know my dad growing up, so I don't know much about his family, and that kind of plays into like that single mother growing up. Just everything's harder, really.
yeah. hmm Yeah, so it's I feel like this topic is like very important because this kind of like dispels some of like the ongoing like narratives like oh white privilege and shit like that when you're saying like hey I grew up dirt poor too. My mom was on Medicare on not Medicare but like
Oh
government
yeah,
assistance and
yeah,
shit.
everything.
Well, probably Medicare, yeah, but government assistance everything. You get it. So you kind of come from that. Well, I'm assuming you come from that pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. Like
Here's what I'll say.
mm-hmm,
Uh, Regardless of the life I lived,
mm-hmm,
I still had white privilege
yeah,
because even though I was poor and things weren't going my way, I wasn't saddled with any of the systemic racist stuff that just happens in our society. Like even now I'll drive with like expired registration and it doesn't even I don't even perceive it as a problem. But my
mm-hmm,
friends are like, "Hey, I can't drive your car because the registration is expired, and that's just a reason for them to pull me over. I can't drive it." I'm like, "Oh,
yeah,
I literally had no concept of that." So, and I think it's important to note, like when it comes to privilege, it's not that I didn't have a hard life; it's that my life was not hard because of
who
my
you are,
identity.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, all right, nah, it's a good, it's a good like view of it because some people they'll be like, "Oh no, I was poor too," but like you acknowledge, like, "Yeah, I was poor, but like I had it somewhat easier. Like I could get away with more."
Yeah, like if you put my life, every fact of my life next to a person of color, like you would very quickly be able to see disparate outcomes in a lot of the scenarios I was involved in, like getting in trouble at school or getting in arguments and things, or like throughout my military career, I was kind of butt up against authority because when someone's doing the wrong thing, even when they wield authority, I'm not going to back down.
Mm-hmm,
And imperceptibly I benefited from being white in those scenarios because I was not seen as the angry black man
mm-hmm.
or the perceptions that my raised voice is louder or angrier than it actually is because of those implicit biases that people have.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I'm complaining and everything, but since I'm white, it's kind of like they kind of ignore it. Like if it was a black guy, you'll probably get insubordination, this, that, and the third. But it's just like, here goes Chris again. What
Yeah.
are we gonna do with this guy?
I got a lot of that. I definitely got a lot of that.
Okay, okay. So growing up the only kid in your neighborhood, even though you left by 9, was it? Sorry.
Yep.
How like what are some of those experiences being the only kid that was not only kid, but some of the like being a minority in the community? Like what were some of the things that you went through and what were some like when was it that you realized like, oh shit, I'm white?
So I think I always perceived it, but it's like you didn't perceive it that it mattered
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. I think it was when I left St. Louis and I eventually moved to Northern California where the population was more white and more affluent, but I was still poor, which almost made it worse. Like it's not bad if you're in a minority neighborhood and everybody's poor because then you're like baseline social status. But I went to kind of a town that had a lot of more affluent people, but I was still the poor kid, and it felt
Mm-hmm.
much more exaggerated. Like when I was in high school, I was riding a bike that didn't have like pedals or a seat. It was like I called it rolling death trap. It was like a piece of crap, and there was kids
A
showing
pedal
up.
or a seat? Damn.
No, it was bad. It was like you had to stand up
It was a
in
scooter
order,
basically.
in order to ride it. And then I'd see people showing up to school with like a BMW their dad bought for them, and it's
Mhm,
like this is very strange to me. So I didn't perceive it when I was in St. Louis because it was like, as I said, when you're 8 years old, it's like everybody is the same. You don't even start to see those disparities. But as I got older, I started to perceive it, but I really attribute a lot of my time in St. Louis as grounding me in like there's certainly people from different backgrounds and races,
mhm.
but generally it doesn't change how I perceive them. I'm not saying I'm colorblind,
Yeah.
but you know, my baseline is meet people where they're at and tailor how you interact with them based on how they are as a person, not any other preconceived notions.
No, yeah, that's the same. And I feel like that's kind of like how everybody should look at it. Like people are people. Like don't judge them or make them your enemy until they give you a reason to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. So okay, so you didn't totally grasp the, for lack of a better term, like level of poverty you were in until you got around outside of your peers and went to the rich areas.
Yeah.
So other than like your transportation and then like seeing like the other rich kids having like cars and BMWs and whatnot, what were kind of some of the other like standout moments that made you realize like, oh shit, wait, like
You know what I'll say? I still struggle with as ridiculous as it is. I'm 45. I'm turning 46 this year. Like as ridiculous as it is, I still get very uncomfortable when people give me gifts or buy things for me. Um, because I remember standout moments. I remember obviously living in a homeless shelter. That's a pretty big standout
yeah,
moment to
yeah.
recognize you're in poverty, right? But I remember, and I talked to my kids about it. I remember when we would go shopping, we would add up the groceries as we were putting them in the cart because we had a very finite budget for food. And then, because there was so much shame associated with putting food back when you're at the checkout.
Mm-hmm.
And then I even remember this was way back in the 80s. I remember when my mom would go to pay for groceries and she would like, you had the food stamp booklets and you would have to like pull them out and it would make like that perforated paper tearing sound as you're pulling it out of the booklet. That felt like that was everyone could hear it and everyone
It was
knew,
so loud.
yeah, that we weren't buying our groceries, the government was buying our groceries. I would literally wander off when it came time to pay to not be near that checkout line when it was being done, and I would come back and like load up and go home.
Nah, yeah, I definitely get it. It's like once you're in a situation, you always feel like all eyes are on you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fucked up. I feel like also in those situations, like the cashiers and stuff almost shame you. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you got these stuff, like, all right, like it's a hassle. And then it draws more attention to you. And then you as a child is like, all right, my mom is getting what we need, but it's like it somewhat feels bad because it's like, damn, like why is everybody looking at me? Why are they talking shit about us? And then like you hear the typical stuff like, oh, like they're poor or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
And then
Nah,
like
definitely.
Christmas would come around. I wouldn't get
Mhm.
anything, but we weren't like a Christian family, so we didn't really celebrate Christmas anyway.
Mhm.
And like I knew at a very young
You were
age
just
that
not religious?
we were religious but not Christian. So like we didn't celebrate the commercial aspect of Christmas, but we certainly recognized and honored that Jesus, that was like the day commemorating Jesus Christ. But like the day of Christmas, every kid would be out with their new thing, whatever that new thing was, and we would just like mull around and play with everybody else's stuff. And I remember this one was a big event that still like bothers me. I remember one year, maybe I don't know, 87, 88. So I was maybe 7, 8 years old or something like that. And we went to this like Shriners, like those lodges where they have the people that have,
The one with the hat, they have the
yeah,
fezzes, yeah.
and they were doing like a Christmas dinner or something like for charity for poor people. And so like we had gone and we were having dinner and then like Santa Claus came out and he had a big bag of whatever. And I knew, like, I knew Santa Claus wasn't real, but I didn't ruin it. And it was like, okay, this is what it is. And I knew we didn't have any money, and I knew those presents were not from Santa. They were from like the parents laundering their presents through the Santa character. And there's some of the kids were getting like really nice presents, and then my name got called, and it really surprised me. And I came up and I got it, and the process was you would open the present in front of everybody. There was maybe 100 people at all these tables and stuff, and I got like a gumball machine, like a little toy gumball machine that had gumballs in it, whatever. And I had to like hold it and show it, and then everybody there was clapping. And I didn't know what bothered me. I didn't even understand it bothered me, but like looking back on it, that was probably the most clear example of the shame that I had associated with poverty, where they didn't give me that present to make me feel good. They gave me that present for them to feel good about giving a present to a poor kid. And I had to do a performance to
Mm-hmm.
receive it
Yeah,
so that
nice.
they could feel good about what they did for me. And
Mm-hmm.
it felt like the shame and just the I've never felt more separate from those people than that moment. And I felt like my situation was being exploited for their emotional sort of benefit.
Yeah, right. And it's funny like you when you bring up not funny, but like when you bring up this situation is like it made me think about it like, oh yeah, like why do they just make you show it? Like if it's for the good deed, just have them take the gift, have them take it home. Like what like they want to see the happiness on your face. They're like, oh, he's a grateful kid. He's happy for this toy. But it's like, don't put that kid on the spot. He's already here, maybe not even by his own will, but he doesn't like it's a certain sense of like you said the shame, but it's also like it makes you kind of feel like they pity you, like, oh,
Yep.
these people are pitying me right now. Like
And
they're what
it felt like I was being exploited for their
hmm
benefit.
they were photo ops also.
I don't know, probably. I'm sure there
Yeah.
was like me with Santa type of deal. I mean, it's the 80s, so photos are like you really never know
Yeah.
what's going on. But it felt I didn't perceive it for a long time, but I carried, and I still carry a lot of shame associated with receiving gifts or anything like that. It really bothered. Like
Damn.
I don't even like when somebody buys me lunch. It really I'll buy. I will go so far as if a check comes out and they act like it's too much of a hassle to separate the check, I would rather buy the whole check to not have someone buy my portion of the check.
Mhm.
So
Okay, so they give you the present, you open it up, you feeling like this weird sense of like shame, and you go home and do you talk to anybody about it? You said you had a brother. Do you remember actually like processing those feelings, or did you just play
no,
with it?
no, I think I inhaled all that gum. It was like that cheap gum that turns your fingers different colors, tastes good for 3 seconds, and then turns into just like rubber. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Okay,
yeah. I'm
okay.
pretty sure I like ate all of it in like 2 days. No, I
Mhm.
didn't. I didn't start processing a lot of that stuff until much, 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 much later in life. If anything, it was just kind of living in trauma and how that trauma guides your maladaptive behaviors and all the things of your life. And you have no idea that those traumas is what's driving these sorts of behaviors at all.
Okay. So do you other than just like not accepting gifts, well, you accept gifts, but you fight it somewhat. What are some of the other things that came with that? Like that.
From like a childhood of poverty.
Well, no, just from like that situation. Because you said like you didn't know the effects that it had on you. Did you find yourself like kind of being a little bit like less so like being more antisocial, like not like avoiding people somewhat so you don't have to have that interaction with them that they'll be
Um,
in a position of power?
I'll tell you what. I did. There's you ever heard of something called the Human Library?
No, no. But
A
could you
human
elaborate?
library is like it's a nonprofit and it's all over the place. And essentially, it's you can set up a human library in any location. Typically, I think universities or nonprofits do it, where essentially they solicit people that have interesting stories to tell, and and basically they describe what they want to talk about, and then audience members basically peruse the stories and they pick a person. Essentially they pick a book, and then they go into a sort of get together for that. um, I did that once, kind of talking about something similar, and at the end they gave us like a certificate that was just kind of printed out,
Mhm.
and they had us like hold it up and get a picture taken, and that felt very very
Similar to.
similar. Like, I wanted to share the story because I wanted people to understand where I came from, much like what
Mhm.
we're doing now, right? Like, we're engaged in a conversation. I think I surprise a lot of people based on where I am in my life compared to where I came from, and I think that's an important part of growth, is discussing with people the surprising things about our backgrounds, the stories that make us people, and what we share together. I think it breaks down biases and things. But if you were to give me a certificate for participating in this, it would cheapen the experience, if you
Mhm.
know, and you wanted me to like take a picture with it. And that's kind of what they did, and it felt very very similar, that once again my trauma or my poverty had been converted into a commodity with which I was rewarded with something that was almost shame inducing. So I never did it again.
And going into it, did you have any like knowledge that this was gonna be that was gonna be something they were gonna do, or you just
No.
felt like hey, they invited you over, hey, we're throwing this event for that short story that you wrote. Can you just come and share some details and talk to the people?
Yeah,
And
that
then
was it.
okay.
And I thought it was just, and it was also a little bit strange because it was with classmates, so it's not like they were strangers. It feels like it'd almost be easy with strangers because you're never going to see them again. I was with classmates, but that didn't really necessarily bother me because I think it just kind of surprised them, because when you see me walking around, there's a lot of assumptions about where I come from and what my experiences are. And when you kind of hear my background, that's definitely a surprise to people. Um, if anything, it's not to garner accolades or pity. It's more to really show that everyone has a different story, and you should never assume anything about where somebody comes from ever.
No, that's great. That's true, and I feel like it takes a conversation like these where you actually get to voice your dismay of certain situation that let people know like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this like this. Maybe we shouldn't put people on the spot.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I feel like things like that will continue to happen. Even nowadays, like the new thing is like with social media, they want to show the gifts, they want to show feeding the homeless, they want to show everything, and it's just like, yeah, you're doing good, but it's also like we're not like everybody knows that you're doing this for views or for attention. Like we're not blind to the fact, but it's like then you could say, hey, I'm still a good person because I'm doing this and but it's just like I know there's a scripture about it somewhere, but I just can't remember because it's just
Yeah,
like
I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Like, it has to do with pride and ego
yes,
and hubris, and charity should be only about bettering the world and have absolutely nothing to
hmm
do with you, your status. And I think that's also, I think that's essentially, um excuse me, I think that's a problem that we seem to have. Not to get too far off topic, but those people that were at that dinner,
hmm
I think a lot of people in America generally, not maybe not a lot of people in America, but people that are well off financially in America, I think they would rather spend money than do good. And
hmm
it's almost like spending the money on charity washes away all of their selfishness and egocentric stuff day in and day out or throughout the year. And it's almost like if you chase money and tithe 10% to your church, then you're still fine.
hmm
And I think that's where they get really wrapped up in the look at me, I'm giving, because they're actually morally bankrupt in most other things, and they have to amplify their quote unquote altruism for their own ego, which
yeah,
also makes it not altruistic at all.
yeah, and you know the crazy part too is because like one thing that we kind of like overlooked on it too is like that these charitable things that they're doing isn't necessarily all just for the glitz and glamour. It's really for a tax write-off most of the
Correct.
times.
Also true.
Yeah, so they definitely benefit on a monetarily, like they're benefiting monetarily also from
Yeah.
seeming like they care and they're good people and this, that, and the third. And it's not to say that people that donate to charities and get tax write-offs, that all of them aren't corrupt and shit, but these type of things get manipulated.
Yep.
Mhm.
No, agreed.
And I mean, even though like even with the it being a Shriners event, that's even a little bit more like okay, like Illuminati type of flow, but
Yeah, I
whatever is
kind of
going
don't like
on there.
Shriners anymore either, in general.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you know like they're kind of like they're behind like the clown movement and shit? Like clowns are
The clown movement?
like not the clown movement, but like clowns, like they like
Oh yeah, yeah,
pioneered
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And
Like
the
wait, that's
little
why they drive those
car.
like little cars and stuff.
Yes, a
Yeah.
little. Yes, yes. I didn't know that until recently. I was like, oh shit.
There's that whole weird thing with like the Masons, the Shriners, like there's these weird fraternities that are like this subculture that's like I'm not saying like Illuminati or tinfoil hat, but it's just
Hmm.
kind of weird that these things existed. And I think they aren't nearly as important today as they were 50 years ago, but it's a
That we
weird
know
thing.
of. That we know of. Yeah.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. Well, are you a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hatter, or not? Not really.
No.
No,
No.
not at all. I
No.
I I I I like to dip and dab in it, but yeah.
I think most people are too dumb to maintain a conspiracy, and most conspiracies require too many people to function.
Mm.
I think is the problem. Like you know, the whole chemtrail thing.
Hmm.
Like I worked in aviation for 20 years.
Oh, this is perfect. Yes. Okay. Good.
Like
Dive deep.
like the amount of people with with low standards for secret keeping, the amount of people like there was no great vetting to get people in the military and aircraft maintenance. Like, yeah, there were security clearances and stuff, but the people you would see, their life was just a mess. Like, they couldn't keep their shit together. Like, the scale of a chemtrail operation, the scale of people for a chemtrail operation to work is so massive that the chances of there not being a dummy involved in that conspiracy are essentially zero
Hmm.
or guaranteed. So therefore that would be very easily exposed. And actually it leads me to a second point I'm going to make that I figured out a few months ago. You ready for this? You're going to love this.
Okay, good. Let's drop it on. Pause.
So when did we have like all of our UFO video and all our UFO reports? You remember the time frame we were looking at where everybody was saying they see UFOs? You saw these blurry videos and things. You remember the years where you saw like a huge spike in it?
You talk about in recent times?
No, I'm talking about historically in the United
Historically,
States.
when did it start? Wasn't
Yeah.
it there during the testing of the atomic bomb and stuff?
Yeah, like 50s, 60s, you
Mm-hmm.
saw a whole bunch of every 50s, 60s, 70s, up into 80s. You saw people constantly talking about UFOs and aliens, alien abduction. The X Files TV show came out. Like it was a whole cultural phenomenon, and everybody was saying they were seeing aliens, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is the fun part. Okay, so what percentage of Americans had a camera on their person ready to record in the 1950s and 1960s? What percentage of our population at any given time do you think had that available?
I would say anywhere from 3 to 1%.
I would say like 0.001% because you had to afford it
Mm-hmm.
because cameras are super expensive, right? So you eliminate probably 50% of the population right off the bat. And then you had to have it ready to go, whatever the power source was, charged, the lighting, and also like, right? Okay. So in 2024, what percentage of the American population has a camera on their person ready to record at any given time?
100%. Damn
Yeah,
near.
99%
Yeah.
probably, right?
Yeah.
So you would think that you would see more UFO video today than you saw 50 years ago, just based on the amount of cameras ready to record, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so you would have to then go, well, if there's so many cameras and we're not seeing it, then it's very unlikely that it was actually happening, right?
Yeah.
All right, now so now let's inverse this. You ready?
Mhm.
In the 1950s, 1960s, how many times did you see police brutality against people of color on video?
On video, I mean, I'm not too well versed in this type of topic, but I'll say you would see it on the from me thinking. I'm the only thing I could think about is like those during the segregation time when they were
Civil
when
rights stuff where they're hosing them
civil
down and stuff.
rights,
Okay.
yes. hmm So,
How
but for
how off
publicity,
how often do you see in 2023, 2024 video of police brutality or questionable police behavior with people of color?
you see probably like a three or four every here and there. Like
So
you get a
certainly
couple, not
more
as
than used to, right?
hmm yeah, because
So,
you before it'll be like probably a couple a year, and then you'll see the real brutality will probably happen like in the protests and all of that.
yep.
hmm
So so if there were if there's more cameras now than there were in the 50s and we're seeing less UFO video, it's very likely UFOs aren't real because if we have more cameras now compared to them, we should actually be seeing more UFO videos, right?
hmm
And then you can do the inverse, which is we're seeing much more videos of police brutality or questionable police procedures for people of color in America now than we did in the 50s. But we do have more cameras now. Those both basically support that when your cameras goes up, your evidence goes up when it's in something that's actually happening. And
Yeah.
also, like when you see these videos where there's these problematic sort of interactions with people of color by police, a lot of people of color are not surprised by these encounters.
hmm
Like this, like yeah, that's what we've known. That's what we've been saying the whole time.
Oh no, yeah, definitely. And yeah, yeah. It def it definitely is a thing like that is prevalent. It happens, but then it's also like being a kid. Definitely they definitely like look at like teenagers and stuff like that. Cause as a grown man, like it's very rare for me. Like if I'm not like hanging out on a fucking block or doing something, that's a cop is gonna try to stop me.
Yep.
But it's definitely a thing. But and then there are situations like circumstantial situations where like some random you could just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unfortunately, it's some
Yeah.
there's this weird guy or like these people with bad intentions and stuff like that. But I like your example because that's definitely a good example of like we see the jump in more film and reports of stuff. But I would say we do have a lot of videos, but it is kind of like what you say because it's like if it's so prevalent, like
There should be videos
everybody,
all over the place.
everybody should know somebody because we see videos, but how many of us know someone that's actually seeing the UFO? And I
Yeah.
try all the time, like I'm looking at the sky all day. You feel me? Like I want to see one so bad, bro, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, now yeah, but that's definitely interesting. But to get back into what we were talking about earlier, so I want to know what led to your interest in mechanics? I'm guessing first
Oh, I
because
had no interest. That was the Air Force telling me that that's what they wanted me to do. I my
okay,
I was not mechanically inclined when I took the ASVAB test, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test in high school.
yeah,
I scored the lowest on mechanical. I scored the highest on like admin, but I went to see my recruiter essentially because I didn't have any. I graduated high school and I didn't. No one in my family had graduated high school. No one in my family had gone to college, so I had no sort of mentorship for how to get. I didn't even know there was need-based scholarships. I just assumed college was not
you have to
possible for me.
pay.
Period. I
Mhm.
just can't go. I would never. I college is not for people like me. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. So I was like, well, if I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, I might as well join the military because that's better than nothing. And
Okay,
they were like, well, you qualify for mechanical. I'm like, yeah, but like admin's my highest score. It's an aptitude test. Shouldn't you be putting me in like an admin job? They're like, well, you really don't understand how this works. I'm like, no, I do. But I also understand like you're trying to make quotas and you kind of don't care where I go as long as I meet the minimums. But what you're missing out on is if you slot everyone into the one they're most apt for, you would get the highest performance out of each person. That should have been a really good giveaway that I was not going to like fit in well in the military because I was arguing before I even joined.
Yeah, I mean, aren't they? Don't they look for people that are not docile, but they take commands? Like that's what a typical like your typical perfect soldier will be someone that just takes
I
commands, right?
think you overestimate their screening for people joining the military.
Okay.
They're not looking for anyone. They're looking for basically anyone can join the military unless they have something that excludes them from joining, which would be like a mental health diagnosis, a physical diagnosis, criminal record that can't be wavered, other things. Like that's it. Like essentially, as long as you're not excluded, you're going to go into the military.
Okay, because you can't go in if you have felonies, right?
Um, I don't know exactly, which I guess is a good segue considering I'm a lawyer now. It's like the general disclaimer for the rest of the podcast is this is not legal advice. I'm
Mhm.
just kind of talking generally. Um, I think it depends on the felony. I think it depends on the crime, and I think it also depends on how desperate the military is for people, how desperate that particular branch is for people, what can be wavered. Because it used to be you had to have a high school diploma in order to join, and then when recruitment numbers were low, they were like, "Yeah, we can waiver that. We can take people that don't even have a GED; they just have some high school, and if you do like 2 or 3 college classes, we'll take you." So essentially, it depends on the crime, on the time you apply, all kinds of stuff.
Okay. So we didn't really get into it, but could you kind of like wrap up high school into the joining the military?
Yeah,
Like how?
so high school I was a dork. I
Mhm.
was a nerd. Like I wasn't like, well, maybe
What
nerd
would
isn't
make
the
what would make you a nerd dork? Like, were you
so
into
yeah, I don't think I
school
was a
or
dork. Like I
or was
had
it like
friends.
niche things?
I think it's because I was super smart and
Okay.
that just kind of slotted you into like that pigeonhole. But I had friends and like I knew people. Um, and then in high school, I actually ended up going to an alternative ed because I got really kind of sick of the rich kid high school environment. It just wasn't for me, and essentially started ditching, and I fell behind, and
Yeah,
so they
kicked out.
plugged me into an alternative ed, um, which was good. Like I don't know if the academic rigor was there, but I got all my high school stuff done and graduated in shoot 1996, I think it was.
Was it good? Because do you feel like the teachers there actually cared like a little bit more? Well, it wasn't. You were ditching school because of the rich kids, so it wasn't a
Yeah,
teacher thing. So okay,
no. So like
what made it
actually
good?
so what made it good was it was a little bit more free form. Like you could pick and choose your assignments for credit. And actually in high school I had a teacher who he made us watch like CNN every single day as part of like our US government class. We were like learning about stuff going on in the world. And then we ended up doing a mock trial, like a mock trial in class. And that was actually the moment I was like, man, I really want to be an attorney. And then my brain went, you can't be an attorney. So like that
You
was
gotta go
my
to
dream.
college, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, there's no college. I can't be an attorney. And I literally just went, I would like to do it. And then immediately removed it from my mind. And that was it. And then I
Where
graduated and kind of bummed around for 6 to 9 months and joined the Air Force and kind of went off to basic training.
so it wasn't a special moment where you ran into a recruiter or anything. You made the conscious decision like, yo, I'm not doing shit. I mean, let me
Yep.
at least go to the army or the
Yep.
military. So
Yes,
what
they
branch
weren't.
did you join?
I joined the Air Force. Initially, I was going to join the Army, but the this is going to sound terrible, but the recruiters had really bad teeth, and that like didn't sit well with me. Like he would talk, and his
All of
teeth
them
were
or
all.
the same guy?
This one guy, and his teeth were like brown and missing and crooked, and it was like I don't know what's going on here, but he's not being taken care of. I don't want to join it. And then I joined the Air Force, and that was also back when "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" had just been repealed. Like it was still on my enlistment. Like, have you engaged in homosexual activity? And he had to like, had just been put into law where they couldn't ask. He had to line through it on the form because those forms hadn't been updated yet. Like
Mhm.
that's how recently that existed.
That's
Yeah, and
crazy.
then I went to basic training, and I essentially decided that no one knows me here, and I can be whoever I want to be, and I just made myself cool
Yeah.
because there's no one that knew I was a nerd or I didn't, and I had money because I was getting a paycheck. So I just literally decided I'm gonna be what I think cool's supposed to be.
So where did you go at first?
So I went to Texas for basic training, and then I went to Northern Texas for technical training. I came in to the Air Force. I didn't know what job I was going to get. I just knew it was going to be mechanical, and I had to like pick jobs. And I joined for 4 years, and I got pulled aside towards the end of basic training by some instructors, and they said, "Hey, you've been selected for a job called tactical aircraft maintenance technicians." And I was like, "Oh, what's that mean?" He's like, "You're going to be working on fighter jets. You're going to be a crew chief." I said, "Wow, that sounds great." He's like, "In fact, we're going to offer you 2 stripes right now. You just have to sign for 6 years." I was like, "Why are you giving me 2 stripes?" They're like, "Because you're the crew chief. We need to give you this rank so you can run your crew." I was like, "Man, this is great. Like, I'm going to show up and I'm just going to be in charge immediately. And I'm not going to have to do it." He's like, "Absolutely, man." So I signed off and did 6 years. And then when I showed up to technical training, they were teaching me all these, like, how to fix the jet things. And after like
With zero mechanical experience.
none, like I couldn't even change a back tire on a bike, right? And
Damn.
I showed up, and after like 2 3 months of learning, I was doing this really difficult task, and I was complaining to another student. I was like, "I don't even know why they're teaching us this. We're going to be crew chiefs." My instructor overheard. He's like, "What are you saying?" I said, "I don't know why I have to learn how to install this. I'm the crew chief. My crew's going to do this." He's like, "What the fuck are you talking about? There's no crew. You're crewing the jet. You are the crew." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you only got 2 stripes because you just signed away 6 years of life instead of your 2 years of life. They give you a few extra stripes. That's it. You have to do all this work." I was like, "Fuck, man." Yeah. So
Oh man. What the fuck? Okay, so all right, so you go through school, and what is your day-to-day operation? If you can even divulge that. I don't
yeah,
know if you
I
can
mean,
really.
I mainly worked in training, so nothing I'm going to say is going to be too is going to be sensitive at all. So I got stationed just outside Phoenix at Luke Air Force Base, and it gets hot. It gets real hot there. You're talking like in 2003 when I was there, it got up to 117 degrees in the shade, and we were working outside on concrete with running jet engines. The jet engines are running, the exhaust is probably 600 700 degrees, and there's like 15 jets running all at once. So like indirect sunlight, the temperature probably had to easily be 135 140 degrees, just like the most miserable you could be. And we worked a lot of hours. Like I was working sometimes I was working 15 to 17 hours. Other times I'd work 12. If I got real lucky and it was an early night, I'd work like 4 or 5, and we'd like go to the club and drink some beers and stuff. But it was my first like real job where there was like all the other jobs I had were either after school
Mhm.
or they were like summer vacations. They were all like finite. Like this was my first job where I I there was no off switch, if that makes sense. It was just we're working and we're working, and it was really 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 exceptionally difficult, and that's where eventually I had to make a reckoning with how I was treated and how I treated others, and that's essentially what the 20 Years Done podcast had become, which was I essentially accepted that I was abused in those organizations, that people just treat you like crap. They talk to you like you're nothing. They um, treat you like you're stupid. You have to be perfect. It's almost impossibly perfect, and you're always worried you're going to kill somebody if you don't do your job right. And what I found is when you enter an environment like that where people just abuse people as a course of business, eventually you're going to become an abuser because that's normalized. And looking back on a lot of that time in my career, I realized that I was a toxic, abusive sort of person. And the 20 Years Done podcast essentially is, let me own up to the harms that I caused. Let me look at what motivated me to behave in such a terrible way, so that way I can like deconstruct it. So maybe if people listen to what I'm saying, they will be able to change course without having to do all the stuff that I'm sort of doing and own up to it, because like that personal pride, that personal ego very often gets in the way of real fundamental change, because you have to protect your image and things, especially when you're actually in the environment.
Mhm. Real quick though, just to touch on something you said, what 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 was the abusive part of, like, what you talking about directly with the military, or like
Yeah,
what would you
so
consider abuse that
so
they did?
like the first thing you need to understand is you have to frame everything in the military culture. So
Mm-hmm.
first of all, there is the during every interaction, there is the unspoken, unwritten, and it is written, but there is the assumption that the higher ranking person talking to you, if you don't do what you're told, you can actually go to prison for violation of a lawful order. And even though they
The
don't
chain of
say it,
command.
right, it's always there. It always
Mm-hmm.
permeates, right? And so also, I did through law school, I did a lot of research through a lot of my schoolwork on laws related to the military. So there's no OSHA, or there's no like OSHA, federal OSHA, that's independent for the military. They do have OSHA in the military, but it's contained within the military. Um, you can't have any unions. There's no union representation at all whatsoever. Or how about like labor rights when it comes to like an 18-year-old kid that just graduated high school? He can't drive heavy equipment at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like there's federal laws that says he can't do that until you reach a certain age or a certain level of competency. In the military, they don't care. You're
Yeah.
going to do all these things. And then there's something else in the military. So way back in the day, used to be you couldn't sue the federal government for them causing harm to you. And then they passed a law called the Federal Tort Claims Act that says, yes, if the United States government hurts you in some way, yes, you can sue. Well, 3 service members got hurt through negligence through the Navy and Army, I think it was. And they tried to sue, and the Supreme Court said, no. Like the Federal Tort Claims Act allows people to sue, but military members cannot sue. So now you're in an environment where no matter how negligent or abusive anyone in your chain of command is, there is no legal recourse to hold them accountable at all whatsoever, right? It's almost like, imagine going to a hospital where none of the doctors could ever be sued for malpractice.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be the care you would receive? And I'm sure they would always want to treat you with the best possible treatment. But when there's no accountability for falling below the standard, there's going to be harm that becomes a regular course of business, because in the case of the military, you want to have as much productivity from your people as possible. And I'd always said, you know, I can have this great leadership toolkit and get people to do their job. I can explain to them exactly why it is. I can have them sit with someone and learn the task perfectly. I can take time. I can do all these things. Or I can just yell at them and make them afraid, and they'll still do it. And I said, being an asshole is a shortcut to productivity. I can have a good leadership toolkit, or I can just yell at them, and yelling at them takes 3 minutes, and developing them takes hours or days or weeks or whatever to grow them into that position. And if I am only looking at short-term productivity and I can't be punished for it, then abuse is just going to kind of run rampant. So when you think about accountability, like when you have high authority and low accountability, abuse, human nature is there's just gonna be abuse like crazy. So in the military, because there's no legal protections, also, like you can't go to the media, like your First Amendments, because then you're violating good order and discipline, you're being insubordinate, all these things. It's hard to advocate for yourself. It just creates an environment where people are treated poorly. And also, like, think about this way: you can't quit your job. Think about the worst job you've had in your life. You could have always walked away from that job. Yes, you might not have known where your next meal was going to come from, but you could choose your mental health over staying in that position. In the military, you just can't do that. You can't walk away.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because that's going AWOL, right? And
yeah,
then, and the talking back, that will be insubordination, right?
yeah.
Okay. And is that the one that you go to jail for? Like, is that the charge that you get?
So really, like any violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice could include jail time. A lot of times it's at the discretion of the superior officer or something to that effect.
Well,
But
I meant in the context of my superiors talk or whatever it's called. Is it called superior or
Yeah.
yeah, your superior is talking to you and you don't take those or you give them some lick. You talk back or you say you're not gonna do it. You just talk shit. Can you then be charged with
Yeah.
insubordination and go to jail? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And I don't know if you could elaborate some more, like what exactly is like the abuse part? Because I understand like they abuse power and stuff like that, and like they're negligent. Like that's kind of inexcusable. But other than that, like I feel like we also gotta frame it also like I know I might I'm like definitely like not experienced to talk about it. You're obviously a service member, and thank you also for your service. But don't we gotta kind of look at it like this is act like an army, like these are warriors, like yes, they should be treated like with respect. Like they definitely they should not even respect, like they should have a voice because I think that's kind of where like where you're coming from. Like you don't even have a voice. You can't voice your opinion. Like nobody's here to defend you.
Yeah.
And you guys are laying down your lives for us in
So
return.
it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
I'll say is it's so first of all, think of the culture I just laid out with all of those sort of pressures that exist
Yes,
where you
yes,
can't
yes.
say no, you can't quit, and you don't have any legal protections and all these things. And um, you don't have you the best way to describe it is first of all, you have no control over your life at all whatsoever. If you have the weekend off and you're at a water park with your family and some paperwork that you did correctly went up to your boss to sign and he screwed it up, he'll call you in to redo it and you have no recourse, right? So there's an immediate invasion of all of your time and all of your agency. You have no agency over your life. When we're talking about abuse, it's like one story. I so there's a bit of shame here, but I always try to be as transparent as possible. I had a very good knack for using my words to slice someone up, right?
Mhm.
And when I would do that, I would intentionally hurt them with words. I would want them to feel stupid. I would want them to feel incompetent. I would want them to feel a burden.
Mhm.
I would want them to feel shame because I wanted them to stop making my life more difficult with whatever it is that they messed up, which
They're
they,
doing, yeah. Mhm.
whatever they did was a human. Humans aren't perfect, right? And I would bring them in my office and I would find their whatever their weakness was and I would exploit it and twist the knife until I was satisfied, not that their behavior was corrected, that I had hurt them.
Mhm. All
And
consciously, though. Like,
yeah, like so that's where I have to like I don't think I'm a bad person, but I hurt people and I have to take responsibility for that. But now I look at what what influenced me to behave in such a heinous way, right?
mhm.
These are people's kids, these are people's sons and daughters. These are people that might have just shown up to the military with a whole bunch of childhood trauma and they just can't do what needs to be done, but I am so resource starved. I am so mission driven that I'm just going to abuse someone. Like imagine walking into a job where you're given the worst tasks, you can't talk back, and anytime you're not perfect, even though you're not given the tools to do your job well, and when you're not perfect, there's some monster who's smart that's going to come along and just eviscerate you and spill your emotional guts all over the place in publicly sometimes where your
Mhm.
friends are like watching with glee as you're emotionally tortured. And by the way, at no time did a supervisor pull me aside and go, "Hey, don't do that." Because when I would do those things, those people would produce. And I was actually rewarded and promoted because my production numbers were so
Yeah,
good.
that's what I was gonna ask. Would it be the opposite? Would it say
Yeah,
like, yeah,
a thousand
keep
percent is
ripping
the
their ass?
opposite.
So yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. Were those words ever vocalized though? Like, yo, stay on their asses. Like, was
Oh
that
yeah.
ever?
I
Okay.
remember, so I did a podcast, I think like episode 30 or 31. I did one with one of my frequent guests, Mike Sissel. We really kind of deconstructed how he was abusive. And in his story, his supervisor came up and said, "Good job."
Hmm.
Like he was ashamed. One of the stories that I was most ashamed of was, it was a Friday night, and like, I don't know, 2011. I had been working 16 hours a night, 5 or 6 days a week for months, and I was exhausted. And it was a Friday night, and for whatever reason, all the jets were good. We were looking at maybe a 4 or 5 hour night total. We were going to finally get home. We could watch movies with our wives. We could spend time with our kids. We could have a full weekend. It was like, it was, we were all very excited. And there was this guy that worked for me who just was not mechanically savvy. Like, he was just really clumsy. Had a lot of insecurity, a lot of anxiety, and confidence is really important for this job. And he was socially awkward, so he was very much excluded from like the shift group.
Hmm.
And when you're in aircraft maintenance, nothing can be missing ever, because if something is missing in the cockpit, it can affect the ejection system and a pilot dies. If something's missing near the engine, it can get ingested, or it can jam up. You can't, every single thing that's installed in the jet has to be installed, and nothing can be missing. And if something's missing, you have to essentially rip the jet apart to find it, no matter how small it is. And he came up to me on a Friday. I was like just driving the truck around at this point. I was a supervisor. I was just driving the truck around, checking on all the things. Everything was wrapping up. We were going to go home in like an hour, hour and a half. And he came up to me and he said, "Hey, Sergeant McGee, I'm missing this Teflon piece off my generator by the engine." And if he had not told me, we could have all gone home. Like, it took integrity for him to say, "This is missing,"
Yeah.
even though he knew he was going to ruin everyone's night. And he was already unpopular. And I had said to him, very, very matter of factly, not dramatically at all. I just said, "I hate you, right?"
I'm sorry to laugh. I'm sorry to
No,
laugh.
like that.
Yeah.
And that's like, we're talking hate. Like,
Yeah.
that's like what dictators do to oppress, like hate. This is somebody that worked for me, that relied on me, that had come up to me with this bad news that was the right thing to do.
And he
And
knew you're about to lay get in his ass.
I said, "I hate you, right?" And that was bad. And he said, "I know.
Ugh.
I'm just glad you admitted it." And I drove off, and we ended up pulling a motor that night, and it was a 12-hour shift, and we kept like a crew of 5 people, and weekend duty had to come in. And I have
Wait,
since,
so just for wait, could you explain what happened in that situation? So just be was he missing a piece or was what happened in that instance that you had to pull a 12-hour shift?
because something was missing near the engine, it was
Yeah.
unaccounted for. And so we had to depanel the bottom half of the jet trying to find this piece, and we couldn't. So then we had to remove the entire jet engine, which takes 4 to 5 people. And as soon as you remove a jet engine, you have a full inspection of the engine bay, and you have to reinstall, and you have to do an engine run. It's a 12-hour ordeal for 4 or 5 people for the piece this big, piece of Teflon. Yeah, like, he knew that telling me he was going to create a 12-hour shift for 4 to 5 people. And like, this is somebody that worked for me, and I
Yeah.
I lashed out at him. And I've talked to this individual. I've apologized to him probably 3 or 4 times. Like, there's a lot of shame, and eventually I moved up a position. I became like in charge of the personnel, including him. And the first thing I did was I said, "Where do you want to go? Like, pick a job you want. I will get you that job. Like, not to get rid of you. You've done your time. You deserve to go to a job where you can flourish and not have to be here and be miserable. I owe that to you."
And this
And
is when you already had turned your leaf.
um, no, I mistakenly thought at the time that I was a horrible person only when I was in very specific roles.
Mm.
But after I retired, I really kind of looked back and realized that I was toxic and abusive. It's just my toxicity was different depending on the role I happened to be in.
Mhm.
So this was when I was in a different role, so I was maybe less caustic and less abusive, but I had still felt bad for what I had said, and I had apologized. And so I made it a point to find him a job that he would flourish in, which he did. And then I think 3 or 4 years later, I ended up being a supervisor again, and we were on good terms. But that still didn't change the fact that, um, like, I am very, very, very blessed and lucky that nobody committed suicide that worked for me on my watch. Because I don't know how I'd reconcile the things I did and my behavior if they committed suicide, because I would not be able to explain away how I was not a contributing factor for that suicide.
Wow. So you were so you were really like that, like hard on their asses, like everywhere you went
Yeah, I
for the
was known
most part.
for it. I was known for it. Yeah.
Mm. Damn, I appreciate you like just sharing that because I know it takes a lot. And like living with the fact like that you cause pain in these people. Like and I was gonna ask earlier like why did you apologize, like, or what happened after, but just I get it. It's just like it's just the environment, and it's just like
Yeah.
it's happening, like who knows what happened after, like all the guys hate him even more, and like it's just the whole scenario is just everything is compounding, and is
Yep.
I get it, it's a lot.
It
I
is.
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's rough, bro, and it sucks because it's just like you didn't initially go into this wanting uh
Nope.
a position of power. It
No.
just that was just like the cards that was dealt to you, man.
Yeah.
So so okay, so something else that I wanted to talk about. Interesting that you said you're not into the whole UFO shit and all
Hmm.
that, but a lot of the recent shit is Air Force people. So it's like what you don't believe like the testimonies are like Commander Fravor and like
So, like, I know there's like those weird videos and things, but to me, none of that is conclusive enough for us to say one way or the other. A, whether it was an actual anomaly that was like they're doing it, but also, you know, is it alien or is it just, hyper technology from us or another government? Like, I don't know the answer to that. So it's like, until more is known, I just kind of wait.
yeah, I get it.
Now, like, the universe is massive. I fully believe there is intelligent alien life out there. 1,000% I believe that. It's almost mathematically impossible for it not to be, right? I just don't know if I have no earthly idea if any of it's
So
there.
you working in the military for 20 years in the
Hmm.
Air Force,
Yep.
you have no knowledge of someone that you personally knew that had an encounter.
Never saw anything even remotely questionable.
And you were stationed on the East Coast, was it?
I was mainly in the Southwest. I was in South Korea for a
Oh,
year.
Arizona, yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
was in Arizona, New Mexico, and then I was in South Korea for a year.
Mhm.
But no,
Okay.
yeah,
All right, now I mean, it just goes to show like who knows what this shit could be, all horseshit. But I mean, one of the most one of the funniest like like anti-conspiracy things that like has been brought up in recent times that is kind of funny to me is like who's holding the camera, like with the moon landing, and then like the best one is the atomic bomb one now, because I'm like what the fuck, how the fuck did that camera survive, like especially now that like I deal with like you gotta like come
yeah.
how the fuck did that camera survive, bro?
I don't
No.
know. Like, I don't know if it's zoomed in. I don't know if it's behind like some massive plexi. Like, I don't know. I get it,
Yeah.
but
Okay,
also, like, I
man.
always look at it, how many people have to be in on it for make this work, and how is it none of them have talked? Because humans, they all talk. People don't keep secrets at all.
So how do you feel about when they release like the documents like through like FOIA and stuff like that? Even though a lot of shit be like redacted and stuff, like do you believe is it like as far as like UFOs come, like, do you feel like it might be orchestrated, or do you not want to like talk about like
I don't mind
a
talking about it
nefarious side of the military maybe that may exist?
because I don't know anything. But what I'll say is
Okay.
kind of semi-related. Um, is after I retired in 2018, I started writing a blog, the 20 Years Done blog. So the podcast was originally a blog, and I was just telling stories from my career. This was a good leader. This was a bad leader. This was a good leader. This was a bad leader. And then in October of 2018, there was essentially a new mandate from the Secretary of Defense saying he wanted these certain aircraft to reach a certain readiness rate. And I was really afraid that maintainers were going to kill themselves trying to reach that. And I wrote an article called "The Crisis in Aircraft Maintenance," and it went minorly viral.
Mhm.
But the point kind of being that I had I had written about these things, and I was I was predicting there was going to be these suicides. And what I actually did, I submitted a FOIA to the Air Force, and I said, I want to know how many people committed suicide by their job code for the last 10 years, because I think that there's going to be these spikes related to policy and things
Mhm.
in these certain career fields, because I knew my career field had a lot of suicides and was very kind of caustic and a very unhealthy culture.
What type of policy?
I mean, so like going back, so in aircraft maintenance, we have a whole bunch of metrics to keep track of the health of the fleet, how quickly we can fix them, how often they break, when they're ready, which systems are broken, which systems break frequently. And in 2010, we had very good manning. It was like post surge for manning, so we were at like 100%, 110% manning at a lot of the units, and we still could not meet an 80% mission readiness rate because the jets were old, our people were tired, and we were just overworked. And then if you remember, around 2011, there was something called sequestration, where they were forced to balance the budget, and it essentially cut the DoD budget by 10%. And there was a continuing resolution that cut the DoD budget by 10% as well. So it was operating essentially at 20% low. And the Air Force's solution to that was to cut a whole bunch of people from the military, and there's something called force reduction.
Mhm.
So in
Cut
2014,
people from the military. Yeah.
yeah, we sent the notification that people were likely to be cut from the military on Christmas Day, 2013. On Christmas Day, they got the email, and what we used to decide who
Ah,
stayed
man.
and who left were not people that were skilled technicians or good leaders, or people that did one sit up too few on a PT test. They were great mechanics, but they didn't do enough sit ups one year, and then they got a bad performance report, and then the Air Force says, "Well, we don't want you anymore." We ended up cutting, I think the number was something like 14,000 people, and I ended up doing a lot of FOIA work. So essentially, I got these metrics prior to these cuts. I got the metrics after. I got how many sorties we had flown for the last decade for these airframes. And essentially, prior to 2014, before we cut a whole bunch of people, we had good manning, but we still weren't able to meet these numbers because the fleet was old and we were tired. And we cut 14,000 people. And in these maintenance career fields, we cut 10 to 15% of some career fields. And then we sustained the exact same operational tempo for the next 10 years. And I ended up getting further FOIA data, and I found that my career field, so in 2014, the Air Force's suicide rate was 14 per 100,000. In my career field in 2014, the suicide rate was 45 per 100,000. So you're not talking a 10 to 15% rise in suicide. You're talking about a 300% rise in suicides. So those are some of the, I didn't get that data until much, much later.
Mhm.
But those are some of those policies. And then we would get, you get a whole bunch of new people flooded in, so your numbers look good. But if you've ever worked at a job where you cut a whole bunch of experience and then flood a bunch of new people in, that actually doesn't reduce the workload. It increases the workload because the people that know what they're doing have to do all the work and train the new people on how to do the work. So it adds sort of burden to it.
Mhm.
And so I had asked the Air Force in 2018, going back to 2018, for those numbers. And they came back after 6-7 months, and they said, "Oh, we don't track suicides by job code at all." And I said, "Okay." So I called public affairs at the Pentagon. I said, "Okay, I'm going to write an article that you don't track suicides by job code, and either you're liars or incompetent. Which angle do you want me to work on this article for you guys?" And that made public affairs very, nervous because you call him a liar, you call him incompetent. Both of those are negative press. And she came back and she came off the record and later confirmed on the record by another senior military leader that they do in fact have suicides by job code, but they're not the release authority. And so I've been chasing these numbers since 2019. So I'm going on 5 years now, and the Air Force has refused to give them to me. They said it violates privacy. They said they don't have it initially. They've basically just stonewalled me. So when you're asking about what do I think about FOIA when it comes to these UAVs or UAPs,
yeah.
UAPs, like, I know that in my experience, the FOIA exemptions are very often misapplied for the benefit of the DoD to not disclose things they just don't want to disclose, because you have to go to court to force them, and they know most people won't. So in my experience, it's very narrow to this one particular thing. It is not unheard of for them to frustrate people seeking transparency to information that will make the DoD look bad. I think that is a very standard position they take.
Okay. So let's get into a little bit of like how you got into the law side of this, because I believe we're gonna have to cut it short because my camera is gonna die. But let's try to hit some more topics that, like, I'm guessing that I'm assuming that you will want to cover. So
Yeah.
how did you?
So I got my degree when I was still serving in the military because they basically paid for tuition. And then I retired in 2018. I finished my bachelor's degree at about the same time. And then I moved up to New England to go to law school, applied, got accepted, did 3 years of law school, which was really nice at 40 years old. Like, I didn't have to worry about the young man's game, so to speak. And I graduated. I took the bar. I was 99% sure I had failed. So I went back to school to get a master's degree to hide out from failing the bar. I was like, I'll just take it again next year. Turned out I passed. And I worked as a VA disability attorney for about 4 or 5 months, and then kind of figured, I can do this on my own. So now I have my own solo practice, the Falcon Forward Law Group, where I'm at www.fafo-law.com, which is, it's Falcon Forward, but go ahead.
No, sorry. I was going to ask, what type of law do you practice?
So I still practice VA disability law, which I think is really important because all those restrictions that I kind of talked about that veterans have on they can't sue if they're harmed, the best way that they can kind of be made whole is through the VA disability process. So that's still my way of giving back and supporting those that served and were harmed through their service.
Okay, so you're not looking to, are you interested in changing some legislation or like getting some legislation passed to put like are you looking to change the military any type of way?
So I am.
Because
so
that's what I was
obviously,
thinking initially when you were saying all these things.
So the whole point of me getting all that information together was because I wanted to give it to Congress because they have oversight authority, and I wanted them to like take a look at these things that are happening in the military. And I've been working on it for 5 years, thousands of hours kind of poured into it. That was all like volunteer work, me just trying to advocate. And I got really lucky because through my network, Senator Angus King's staff reached out to me and asked if I wanted to be interviewed by Senator King for a project he was doing, interviewing veterans in Maine. And I said, sure. And I had all my FOIA data that I had, sorties flown, fleet health, and all these things. And like 5 minutes in, he said, Chris, why is it the civilian aviation can have this good, really high readiness rate, but the military aircraft don't? And I would just rolled. I had everything ready to go. And he was like, I think he didn't expect the granularity in my reply, and he was kind of floored. And afterwards, when we were done recording, I said, hey, I'm trying to get suicides by job code. I think there's a correlation between career fields and suicide across the DoD. But the Air Force keeps stonewalling me. He said, well, do you want help getting it? I was like, well, not really, because I was just going to take it and give it to you because you're on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Can you just go get it? And I work with his staff. His staff contacted me like 2 weeks later. He's like, hey, you want to draft this? Should we draft a study in federal legislation forcing the DoD to to release a report on suicides by job code? I was like, yeah. And then I emailed them like a couple days later. I was like, is there anything I can do to help? They're like, you want to try drafting it? So I was like in my third year of law school studying for finals. I dropped everything. Next thing you know, I'm Googling how to write federal legislation so I can send them a draft. Sent that up, and then in June of 2022, Senator King called me up and read the Senate's draft of the National Defense Authorization Act. It included the words that I had wrote, forcing the DoD to do a study of suicides by job code, and that made it into legislation. It was signed into law last December. The report is overdue by 25 days, and I've been calling Congress, going, "Where's the report?" And I am very entertained that if they had just given me these numbers, I would have been a guy shouting into a microphone in a room. But now that it's like a public study that has to go before Congress, it's going to have some, what I suspect to be very hard to explain information that they have never had to explain before. And fuck around and find out, I guess.
And what is the next goal after that? Like, do you just want there to be changes in the operations of these positions, like in the management and whatnot?
So really it's two goals. First of all, I'm hoping with this study I don't have to take the baton and run it anymore. Like, I've been driving towards this for 4 or 5 years, running on fumes. And I'm really hoping that when these numbers come out, national media starts latching onto it, going, wait a minute, these numbers are really bad for some of these career fields. And I hope there's going to be some congressional hearings and things. But the other thing is this is a very lagging indicator. If people are committing suicide, then you need to back up and go, okay, everybody says suicide is a very complex problem. It is, but when you have particular career fields in the same military that have much higher rates than their peers, you've already accounted for race and gender and age, because it's the military. It's like a very homogenous sort of population that you can pull from. Then you can go, okay, what is specifically happening here? When did it happen? And what were the policies? What happened within this particular organization or this area of the military during this time? Was there a lot of deployments? Was the manning really low? Was the equipment very aged? What was happening the year before, the 2 years before? Because the idea is then we can not make these mistakes going forward. But also, more importantly, when I joined the military in 1998, I had no earthly idea I was entering a career field that had a 300% higher suicide rate than everybody else. I signed a contract that was like 3 pages long. You'd be really surprised how brief an enlistment contract is, that waived some of my civil liberties, some of my rights, and just said, I will follow regulations. I had no idea. There's no transparency here. I think it is fundamentally unfair that people join the military and they have no earthly idea what type of culture and organization they're walking into. There's no transparency. There's no accountability. People get ground the fuck up and they get spit out, and nobody's the wiser of what's going on. So I'm hoping that this is going to be the first step to show there are things going on within the military, and there should be further studies that derive from these numbers, is my hope.
Nah, but you did amazing work, bro. I congratulate you for getting it passed, but hopefully they give you the data, which is that you're saying they're 25 days late. Like, I guess, like, who knows what's going on, bro? But
yeah.
So okay, but I'm surprised. Like, how have you been on like big podcasts to talk about this?
No.
No, like how haven't you been on like Joe Rogan or something? Like, you would actually get a legislation.
Man, I've
passed.
tried. The problem is, like, podcasts like those, they don't post on Reddit looking for guests.
Okay, that's true. That's true.
Like, I don't even know how. Yeah.
You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. Hey, you never know. Maybe we'll make some things happen. Who knows?
Yep.
But wow. Anything else you want to share before we wrap it up?
No, I would just say, I've done a lot of things, but a lot of it had to do with atoning for me being a piece of shit. So all the good I've done is meant to offset the harm I've done. And I can't just apologize. I also I have to do what I can to make it better. And that's what this is. So as much as it looks like I'm doing a good thing, it's really I'm just trying to right the wrongs that I kind of perpetuated.
Well, and I guess I'll just ask a silly, not it's not a silly question, but and I was thinking about it earlier when you were talking about like how you would treat your subordinates are the ones under you, right? So your
Hmm.
subordinates and whatnot. If because of all of this, if there has to be retroactive punishment placed on those people of high command, how would you voluntarily turn yourself in? I
I
know
mean,
this may sound crazy. That's
no, I
like
would.
out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But were your actions even like because you said like you've done your own that like research like and you know like nobody under your care has committed suicide that you know of.
Yeah.
But would you even consider like your actions worthy of not worthy but like deserving of jail time or anything like that?
Uh, I mean, as weird as it sounds, this sounds dumb. I'll say it sounds dumb, but jail time would have been easier than all the stuff I've done
Like the
since retirement.
okay.
Like thousands and thousands of hours and frustrations and fighting and all these things. It's almost like jail time would have been a quicker thing to absolve me.
Hmm.
I would say, um, a and it's also hard for me to say yes I would take it because I know how the military works and there's a 0% chance they would take any measure close to that for accountability, even though they probably morally should. But I can say yeah I'd do that because there's no risk because the military would never reach back ever.
Hmm.
They morally and ethically could or should, but they never will because that's just not how they work. They're not even willing to admit anything wrong has happened, let alone punish anyone for it.
I have a quick question. Has the U.S. military ever been like admitted like that they committed war crimes? Because
Oh, no,
okay, okay,
no.
all right.
Or if we did, we would say, well, that's a individual service member that did it. We didn't sort of endorse it. But like when
Mm,
you, I mean, there's so many times there's so many events where it's like very very questionable things that we've done in the name of democracy or the United States interests that if any other country had done it, it would be like international news. Also, let's all recognize the U.S. is the only country ever used nuclear weapons in history.
mhm.
So
Allegedly, or no?
no, I mean we dropped A bombs on Hiroshima and
Yeah, yeah,
Nagasaki and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. If
yeah.
somebody dropped an A bomb right now, we would lose our minds. But when we do it, it's like, well, we can explain it away. If you as a country can explain away and justify using nuclear weapons, I think that means there's nothing you wouldn't be able to explain away.
What do you say to the conspiracy that the Pearl Harbor was all an inside job just to do this and all that? Have you even
Well,
heard of that theory?
no, like we knew it was coming and we wanted it to happen so that way we could justify getting
Yeah.
involved in the war. Like I've heard that. I don't know. I think the severity of the attack on Pearl Harbor makes me think no,
Hmm.
because they could have achieved the same sort of justification with a lot, like essentially most of the Pacific Fleet was destroyed, like all at once.
Mm. Like they wouldn't
Like,
take that loss just to get into
yeah, they
war.
wouldn't take that loss just to come into the war. That's a huge loss. That's like your entire western flank of your entire
Mhm.
protection is gone. I don't think anybody would be like, yeah, let's roll the dice on that. No, I don't
All
think
right.
so.
And since we're talking about conspiracies, I'm gonna just lay out a couple more conspiracy questions. If it cuts out, it'll add
Sure.
more dramatic effect, right? Uh,
Yeah, like if it cuts out, you're like, oh, that was the one that's real because the government shut down the podcast, right?
but so so do you believe or know of any? because you were talking about how the military loses a whole bunch of money and funding and all this, and they had to lay off mechanics and whatnot, and just people that couldn't pass physical
Hmm.
tests and all that. But do you believe that? Are you familiar with the term like the shadow state, the shadow government, and like the military industrial complex and all of that?
Well, the military industrial complex is just companies that, derive all their money from weapons. So Lockheed Martin, Northrop
Yes, yes, yes.
Grumman, Boeing to a degree. So like that's all real. If we're
Yeah.
talking shadow government, that's like that sort of quasi where you're talking about the executive has administrative actions, agencies that can make decision making in things, um, where there's this perception of they drive policy that's divergent from what Congress or the president wants because they are this continuous organization that kind of flows between electoral cycles, but they stay the same and they can kind of like make the government do what they want over the long term. I think you're just talking about inefficient bureaucracy and
Hmm.
people that are incompetent or unethical, which is not the exclusive domain of the U.S. government or certainly the military.
Yeah.
So for shadow, I would say probably nothing that's like intentionally nefarious, besides them just being selfish assholes that want to keep their jobs. So very often they're motivated by self interest.
And nepotism and whatnot and whatever.
Yep,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. Okay. Now, yeah, definitely makes sense. It just it's good to just ask why not, right?
Yeah, you
Because
can ask whatever you want.
there's so many conspiracy theories out there. And hey, I had somebody else that's in the military, but he literally just like enlisted like not too long ago. Shout out to Serrano. But yeah, I'm blanking. I should have some more conspiracy questions, but hey, fuck it, why not? Fuck it, it's all right. Maybe next time we have you on,
All right.
hopefully, hopefully when the government gives you more information, we could double back around and
I'm
we
hoping
could
it's
take it.
the next week or two. We'll see.
Okay, okay. So let the people know where they can find you. And
So if you look up the 20 Years Done podcast on all the podcast services, you can recognize it. It's a blue fist holding a wrench, kind of like the blue collar holding a wrench and kind of fighting back against authority. And then also, if anybody is interested in a VA disability claim, you can find me at www.fafo-law.com. That's FAFO-law.com.
okay, that's great, man. Make sure you let me get all the links that you would like to be in the description. And just like that, guys, it's been a great episode of Sunny Talk. Make sure you go follow Chris everywhere. And just like that, we'll see you next time. Peace.